What's going on YouTube? Styxbleich here, and today we are going to talk about the Super Nintendo Classic for retro gaming and if you should buy one or not for that purpose, or if you should consider other options at the given price point of $79.99. You'd be hard pressed to find one for that price, but let's pretend it's $79.99. Let's see what other options are also in that space and what you get for that $79.99. Let's get to it.
You tell me I look good.
Alright, so the Super Nintendo Classic. Here's what it looks like, and as we can see, it is identical to the way that an American Super Nintendo Classic would have. Europeans, you get your European version, which is a sleeker, more sexy looking one, but that's completely subjective. So the big thing that you get with it is HDMI out, which is the main reason a lot of people are really excited about that. And the main reason is because if you have an old Super Nintendo, you basically have composite out. There's some ways that you can get S-Video out, but it has some potential to not necessarily work with modern TVs, and that's what you're playing on, let's be honest. So you get 20 plus 1 games. So the 21st game is actually going to be Star Fox 2, sitting down there in the bottom corner. And essentially, that game is unlocked by beating the original Star Fox first level. So you literally just beat one level, it unlocks for you, you're good to go. This is the official release of Star Fox 2. It has not ever come out before, which means that in 2017 we got a brand new Super Nintendo game. That's why this is really exciting, alongside of us getting some classic games that we may not have had access to before. $80, what do you get for that price? You get the Super Nintendo Classic here, which has 2 controller ports on the front of it. All you gotta do is move this little flap thing here, that way it makes it look like a regular Super Nintendo. So, $80 gets you the console, you get a power supply, you get a power cable to go to it, which is just standard micro USB, and you get 2, this time, Super Nintendo controllers with that connection that I was talking about earlier, which is the Wii U connection, essentially, or the Wii connection. It can click into the bottom of a standard Wii controller or a Wii motion remote. And we get 2 this time, which is better than the original NES where you only got 1 and you had to buy a second controller, which was kind of hard to find. And a lot of places sold out of those immediately because, of course, you want to play games with your friends or your family or whoever you're trying to play with. As long as you got an open HDMI in there, you are good to go. You just plug it right into your TV, turn the bad boy on, which it has the actual clicking power switch, which is exactly like how we all remember the Super Nintendo, and the reset switch feels on point, but the eject button, of course, doesn't work because there is no cart slot. That's what you're getting for the price, and you are set. You are good to go for those particular games. But what happens if you want to play games or you own games that are not on this system? What can you do about it, and how can you play them on your modern television? Well, there's a couple different ways that you could actually go about doing that. One of the ways that you can play those games is that you can use the Super Nintendo Classic Modify. What you do with that is you plug it into your computer and you run a program called HackChi 2. I'll keep a link down in the description. And what HackChi 2 allows you to do is load games that are not on the system and make them playable on that system, which is phenomenal. That means that you can take games that you already own or games that you already have and put them onto your Super Nintendo Classic and play them like they were on a Super Nintendo Classic in the first place. There's certain games that a lot of people would love to have on there. Donkey Kong Country 2, for example, Turtles in Time, things like that you can put on there and play it on that console. That is a fantastic way to stretch your $80, to stretch the money on there. There is a risk that you could brick the system or make it completely unusable, but as long as you back up the folder or back up the kernel, there should be pretty minimal risk in there. This is something that I have done on mine, and if you'd like to see how to do it, let me know in the comments down below. One of them is to use what is called a Raspberry Pi single board computer. And a Raspberry Pi single board computer, $35 gets you the board itself. Doesn't come with any HDMI, doesn't come with the memory card for it, which is essentially your hard drive. Doesn't come with game controllers, doesn't come with any of that. But you can also play a ton of games. When it comes to emulation on your end, it is a very gray area. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to get into any of that, but what I will show you is essentially what I use and the setup that I personally love to use for retro gaming. I'm not going to show you where to get any of the ROMs that I show in this video. That is something where Google's your friend, people. This is my Raspberry Pi Model 3 setup. So the Raspberry Pi Model 3 is the one that you're gonna want at least today, November 2017. As you can see, it looks just like an NES Classic. It's a little bit smaller than NES Classic, which unfortunately I do not own. But got I/O sitting up at the front, got HDMI in the back, got your power cable. Your power cable is still a micro USB, just like the Super Nintendo Classic was. And it, size-wise, is pretty darn close. I will put up a picture here just so that you can see what the difference is size-wise, but obviously the Super Nintendo is a bit longer. If I set my my Raspberry Pi setup on top of this, it's actually taking up less space, at least footprint-wise, than the SNES Classic or the Super Nintendo Classic. What do I have on this? Well, I have a lot of games on this particular system. I actually go about putting all my ROMs onto a little USB and putting it onto here, and I basically don't have to do any sort of extensive transfer, and they play it directly off the USB, so I don't have to wait for it to sit there and load into the system, let that do its thing, and then go about actually taking it out and playing it. And with that setup, I have several thousand games, pretty much all the NES games, all the SNES games, and they are playing at very good quality. I'll put up a couple videos of me playing here with the Raspberry Pi set up through my capture card, and you can see the quality is there. The quality is phenomenal. It's very minimal slowdown. This can play up to PlayStation 1 and Nintendo 64 games. So now, Nintendo 64 kind of has a little asterisk by its name. It can play N64, but it's very choppy at the moment. The optimization just isn't fully there. I personally use a 8-bit-o, of course I wasn't prepared, an 8-bit-o controller with the joysticks. They're clickable. Got L2, R2, R2, R1 on the top here, and it reminds me very much, this of course is a Super Famicom controller, or a Famicom controller, I guess. It wasn't a Super Famicom controller. Famicom controller, just adapted to the 24th century. It's got Bluetooth, can connect to multiple systems. I'll put a link down in the description, an affiliate link, so if you do buy it, you're supporting the channel. Great stuff all around. Just as a side note too, I know I'm showing it in an NES case, a Nintendo Entertainment System case, but I do have a Super Nintendo case. I unfortunately do not have it for the video because, like an idiot, I sent it to my parents' house, and I live a little ways away from my parents. I will soon get it, but I will put a link for that also down in the description. It is a fantastic looking case. I can't wait to get it in my hands, and it will be a very apples to apples comparison between these two in terms of look wise. If you're caught up on this is an NES, that's a Super Nintendo, whatever. Essentially, the brains of the computer are exactly the same. The computer itself is the same, so of course the brains of the computer is the same. But the computer itself is the exact same. It's just a matter of the housing that it's actually in. Well, when it comes down to it, there's a couple things to consider about whether or not you should get yourself a Raspberry Pi 3 or a Super Nintendo Classic. One big thing is availability. These bad boys are tough to find. They do a limited number of these, and then they just don't have any brand new systems. That is something that Nintendo did last year with the NES Classic. They're gonna do it with the N64 Classic. Oh, don't know if they're gonna make one. They're making one. They love money. It's just something that you're gonna have to get used to. If you have one of these already and you got one, day 2, if you could find a couple day 2, and you have one of these, it's fantastic. You have everything that you need out of the box to get set up with the games that are already on there. If you know nothing about the way the Hack Chi 2 works, or don't want to watch any videos, because it's actually pretty easy to do. If you guys want me to do a video, tell me down in the comments below. I'll show you how to do it. But essentially, day 1, you are good to go. Just plug it into your TV and you are set. You can sit down, you can play with your friend, your buddy, whoever, and there you go. Now, as far as the Super Nintendo goes, we just covered that. With the Raspberry Pi 3, there is some work that you have to do with it. It is not a plug-and-play system. You have to load the information onto your SD card. You have to know how to do that, which there are a ton of videos how to do online. But again, I could show you how to do it. Tell me down in the comments below if you want to see that. And you do have to get some work to actually get it up and running. And you may not actually want to go through with that. If you are someone that doesn't know how to necessarily work with a whole lot of that stuff, you may not want to do that, and this then will be your go-to because quite honestly, it's easier to do, it's easier to set up, it's easier to play with day one. That bad boy has a lot more that you need to do to it, and it's something where the beginner is definitely going to get intimidated by it. But I will tell you, as you continue on, if you take the time to figure out how to use it, if you take the time to just watch some videos, there are some fantastic people online that will show you exactly how to get things up and running. And that's one of those things where with something like this, you definitely eclipse what is possible on this guy. You just gotta work for it. If you want to play PlayStation 1 games, and you obviously have the copies of them, and you want to play them on one system alongside of your Super Nintendo games or your NES games or whatever, this is definitely the way to go. It is definitely the way that I recommend to play your retro games. It is definitely something that is a lot of fun to tinker with if you're a tinkering type. For those people that aren't, spend 80 bucks. I'll have a link down in the description for this guy, an affiliate link. You buy it, you support the channel. But I can guarantee it's not going to be 80 bucks. It's probably going to be upwards of 120, 130, 140, so on and so forth, whatever. This guy here, not this as you see it, but the brains in here, the Raspberry Pi 3, are always hovering around $35, which is phenomenal. So if you just get a basic little plastic case for it, you don't have to get anything fancy like this. Recommended, it's a lot more fun. But you can get a basic clear plastic case just like this, got a little rubber feet on it so it's not going to slide around, and you can usually get that in a kit. I usually get mine with a Raspberry Pi 3 and a power supply because I know I'm going to change the case, link down in the description. But with something like that, you can customize it to be your own. You can make a case out of Legos. You can do whatever you want with it. You can, if you know how to do more than I do, you can make a custom launcher essentially, and you can go and put your own custom pictures on launch, which is awesome. You can, if you wanted to do something for someone special, like your, cousin or whoever, you could put pictures of you and them, or something that they like. If they like Zelda, put a lot of Zelda pictures on there. If they like Metroid, put Metroid stuff up there. Put fan art, whatever you want to do. This will always start up the same, unless you modify it. But that's getting it a little bit more modification than I'd be willing to do on the system, given the fact that it's getting scalped, and that I don't know if they're going to make any more of these. Probably will, but I'd like to keep what I have relatively in line. I put more games on mine, but I won't necessarily go further than that. I have seen videos where you can actually dual boot the system. You can dual boot with an NES Classic, and it looks exactly like an NES Classic. I'm waiting for that to become a little bit more mainstream, and essentially I want to be able to add NES games as well as SNES games in their own respective areas. Love to see that if that's possible. I personally think spending a little extra on this guy here is going to get you much, much further. And you can get this up and running relatively quickly just watching a few videos. Obviously the Super Nintendo is one of those things, Super Nintendo Classic is one of those things you can just pick up and go. But knowledge is power, people, and learning how to do one of these is awesome. You can help make one for your friends. You can show other people some games that they've never been able to see before. Heck, you can even take one of these guys and put it into small enclosures with a battery supply and a screen, and there you are. Or just toss it in your bag, go over to your cousin's house with a micro USB power cord and an HDMI cable, and you got hours of entertainment in there. Not just Super Nintendo games, you got PlayStation games. You guys could do whatever you want with it. So for my money, this is where I choose to spend my money primarily. However, I will say that the Super Nintendo Classic is definitely something, obviously, that I really enjoy. I grew up with the Super Nintendo in the house. It's one of those things where this will always have a special place in my heart, and I love this thing for the first party feel, the first party nostalgia, buying another Nintendo console and making it seem like something I never really got to do because I was pretty young before this, when this was actually released. So I got to buy my Super Nintendo, which is awesome. And just getting up and running is great. Plugged it into the TV, sat down and just played games. Yes, I had them over here, but it wasn't on a Nintendo. Thank you very much for watching, guys, on this comparison between a Super Nintendo Classic and a Raspberry Pi system. Tell me what you think in the comments below, and if you have any questions about anything, feel free to ask them down there. I will be down there answering your questions, and let me know if you want to see anything else about these two systems, regardless of if it's Hack-Chi 2 or if it's just some basic tutorials on how to do things with this. Like I said, there's several of both of those on the internet, but if you want to see the way I do things, just let me know. Thank you very much for watching. If you like the video, hit the like button. If not, the other button works okay, I guess. And don't forget to comment and subscribe. Thank you.
They tell me I look good.